Are you ready? Good morning, everybody. It's Tuesday, July 28, 2026. This is the Rehoboth Beach Boardwalk Historic Designation Task Force meeting. We're live at City Hall Commissioners Room, second floor of City Hall. I'd like to call this meeting to order at exactly 9:05 a.m. We'll do the roll call. Frank Cole is absent. Kate McKenzie.
Here.
Jim Ellison.
Here.
Dan Parsons.
Here.
Heidi Evans.
Here.
Wayne Neal.
Here.
Christopher Bright.
Here.
Wesley Combs.
Here.
Michael Burton.
Here.
Rosemary Patton is absent. Mason Pretty called in absent. And Mayor Stan Mills is here. I'm the chair. And of course, Heidi is the co-chair. With that, we do have a quorum and are able to formally conduct business today. And so our first set of, and I want to thank everybody that's watching virtually also. And for our in-person guests, thank you for being here. Rules for participation are at the bottom of the agenda, Patty and everybody else. And support documents, those are documents that support our individual agenda items are embedded into the agenda. And I do have a few handouts. If they last, we'll give those out. With that, we're going to move on to approval of minutes, the draft minutes for the June 23rd, 2026 meeting, which was our previous meeting, were distributed earlier. Are there any questions or comments on the draft minutes? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve.
In a second. So we have a motion by Wesley Combs and a second by Jim Ellison to approve the June 23rd minutes in front of us. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those voting members that can vote signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any noes? And so among the voting members, the minutes are approved. With that, no correspondence has been identified. And as far as old business goes, this is a repetitive topic. It's in there primarily for our new guests and visitors that are attending the meeting today. An overview of the task force charge and the member makeup that is embedded in the agenda. And it's just a reminder that the Board of Commissioners authorized this committee or task force to seek out 2 historic designations specifically for the boardwalk. One sponsored by the Delaware Public Archives, those blue historic markers that we see about town. And the other historic marker is registry on the National Register of Historic Places as administered by the National Park Service. And the membership, voting members and non-voting members is listed on that same embedded support document, so we're not going to go over it. I did want to go next over the Freedom of Information Act. We've reviewed this, I guess, every other time, plus we've had a lesson in it. Just a few things to remind us all that we must have agendas for each meeting, each public meeting. The agenda must be specific enough to identify each topic. And the discussion must stay on track with the agenda. That's one of the reasons why I repeat this, because if we start to stray and I have to call ourselves down, then you understand that we're trying to follow the agenda. There also has to be, per FOIA, the notice to the public of the public meeting has to be made at least 7 days prior to the meeting. So I've got to do my thinking at least a week ahead so I can publish this and get it on the poster bulletin board downstairs at least 7 days ahead. I want to let you know that shared deliberations and decision-making must be agendized. It must be on here for us to discuss as a group. and avoid serial meetings when there's more than a quorum. A quorum is 5 members of our 9 voting members. That is, if more than 5 get together to deliberate on task force business, that is a serial meeting and to be avoided. The shared data collection is okay. It need not be agendized. And I know this, I brought this up last time and we had a question about it. So in other words, filling out an application and/or collection of data need not be on the agenda. When in doubt, check with the task force chair. There's also another separate memo that I had sent out earlier that it reiterates that, and that is that FOIA really never contemplated filling out an application during a meeting. Excuse me. And so that's why there's a little no man's land here, you know, why we're going to be able to work individually as we wish and can talk between ourselves on who's doing what and everything. Any questions on that? Again, it's somewhat repetitive. With that, we are going to move to individual presentations, sharing experiences and seeking recognition on the National Register of Historic Places, Delaware Public Archives markers, or other historic acknowledgement, including relevancy to the task force mission. That was the key to this. We wanted to try to keep it 5 or 10 minutes and then allow time for us to ask questions and get some answers. But one of the things we wanted to do is learn about your individual projects within that time constraint the best we can, and also relate it to our project. You know, were there particular challenges that were entertained by you working on a specific project and everything. So I expect that we will not get to everybody today. There are some extra long presentations. Some are meant, at least one is meant just for our information to read on our own in our own background. Some others were meant to pare down a little bit and save the balance for the future. So what we're going to do is I invited the folks from the post office group, I think they called it, part of Main Street subgroup. And I've got Cindy Lovett here, will be up in a minute, and if she'll introduce everybody on her team. And if you recall, the post office just submitted within a month or 2 ago for National Register. And they're willing to share their submittal or registration form. In the future, they don't want to do it until it's been acted on. So they're grateful enough to do that. So we will have an example. Remember, from our first meeting, anyhow, we shared examples of applications anyhow, so we'll be able to do that. The order I'm going to go in here is Rehoboth Beach Main Street, then Daniel Parsons, Michael Burton, Wayne Neal, and Heidi Evans. And again, we're going to have to judge time and cut it off at some point and resume at a next meeting. What I'd like to do is leave ourselves at least 20 minutes to half an hour at the end of the meeting to move on to assignments. So with that, Cindy, if you want to identify your cohorts. And
Good morning.
I sent
sorry.
you a list of questions and things that might help us.
Yeah. Good morning. I'm sorry for the fancy dress, but I just came off the street for Rehoboth and Bloom. So we were very lucky to have Catherine Purge and Mary Jane Dietz on our committee. And I say very lucky because I'd never done this. Susie Martin and I were sort of chose to do this project. And these 2 guys from VIA jumped on board immediately. So if you would like to ask, how do you want to do this? You want to ask questions, or should I just tell you how we got started, or what would you like to do?
Well, let me just ask the question.
Go
like I
ahead.
gave you
That's
on the
fine.
list.
I didn't know if you wanted to just
An
freewheel.
overview of the inception of your project.
It was very interesting. So I'm ex officio on Main Street. This is like right in my face. Ex officio on Main Street's board and co-chair of the design committee. And one of the girls who's relatively new to town came to the meeting one time and said, "Downtown is terrible. Did you ever look at downtown? It's a mess. And look at our post office. It's a mess." And of course, the first thing I did was get offended because I look at the town with my heart and she was looking with her eyes. So once I started looking with my eyes and I looked at the post office and I said, "Oh my God, it is a mess." She's right. So we launched on this, and her name is Paula Evans, and bless her heart, she's as blunt as they come, and I appreciate it. So we just, I don't even know, Catherine and MJ, did we contact you, or did you contact us?
You contacted the VIA.
Is that what it was?
Representatives.
Okay.
Enjoy working on it.
Okay, yes. And then, of course, Paula and Robert Thompson are on Main Street's Design Committee also. So that was the 5 of us. And we just launched on this thing. I have to say, we were frighteningly informal, seeing you guys. I mean, we just sit around a table and, we talked and we decided how this was going to go, and we didn't do any of those things that you guys are doing. So I don't know, but anyway, okay, that's the inception, and it just went from there. Next question.
So your task force number of participants, we have 13 here.
We have 5.
And we had 5, so there may be something easier with fewer numbers.
Yes.
But then again, we've got 2 projects that we're working on.
Correct.
So you had 5. Can you explain briefly the roles of each participant played? By example, I think you said you were the photographer.
Yes. So as we sat around chatting, we realized each other's strengths. And MJ can research until her eyes are blurry. And Catherine just has all this wonderful experience with federal buildings. And Robert Thompson is a historian, local and DC area. And Paula Evans is former military and just like, give her a project, we go for it. I, of course, felt like I was the weak piece of the whole thing, so I did the pictures. So that's really, there was no formal selecting of what you're going to do. We just sort of sat down and said, this is my strength. And would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I think it's very helpful, even if you have a working group, to have leads.
Yeah, right.
As Cindy was saying. So a lead on document control, for example. One person has that. A lead on photography.
Right.
One person deals with the state. And
Right.
that's helpful to
Right.
narrow.
Right. And we very quickly got connected to Emily, who, you've got to use Emily as your resource. She is so full of knowledge, and she's fantastic.
Identify Emily.
Emily Whaley, she is the Sussex County,
She's the state coordinator for the Delaware State.
that's why MJ gets all the money.
Yeah,
is-
we know her,
Yeah,
but we
I
need
know,
you
I
to
know. Okay,
explain.
Fantastic resource.
yes, yes.
So what resources did you use? I know Cindy, you gave me newspaper.com.
Newspapers.com.
But what
yeah.
resources did you use to do your research?
No, that's the paper that we wrote. Okay. Yeah. We had the National Archives. MJ, tell us, because she did, and Catherine.
Delaware Archives.
I don't know if the mic is on, is it?
This is a test that I failed miserably. No.
It's not on. Do you want to come up here? No?
Yeah,
Oh,
just
okay. Okay.
come
yeah.
come up to the microphone if you
Yeah.
would.
Since they're recording, they want you to come up here.
There you go, all three of you.
Come on up. Come on up, MJ.
It'll make you go quicker.
We had an advantage, is that post offices are in important to communities. So there's a lot written about them in historical documentation. National Trust for Historic Preservation has done a tremendous amount of study of post offices throughout the country. And so we had that advantage when you did preliminary research. And because the Rehoboth Beach Post Office is part of the New Deal Department of Treasury programs in the 30s, there are files out the wazoo if you can get to them. So right there was a cadre of national information in history. The challenge with Rehoboth is the newspapers, it's not like there was a local newspaper that was documenting everything in ways that might have been in other communities. And so Mary Jane, she really was. She went through all the newspapers and newspapers.com that you can get to, plus the Delaware State Archives has a lot of information online. Particularly, we spent time going through the postcard collection for a whole host of reasons to try to document, you know, through pictorials, because there were not a lot of things written about the actual construction in the local archives, pictures and that type of thing, not to the degree that we found in other places. So yeah, so it was primary resources, the National Archives, the feds, and then Carl Nath, who is the artist of the mural in the post office. So the next time you're in the post office buying stamps, look up, was one of the few artists who actually had a reputation. And so there's a lot more about him. The Rehoboth Art League had done conservation assessment of the mural about 10 or 15 years ago. So we had things to work with. And then it became a matter of, in any historical research, connecting the dots and finding things. And we did. Yeah. Now, was it exhaustive? One of the challenges we faced was federal government shut down, so we couldn't get to the National Archives, because in College Park, they have a whole room, or used to, set aside for research when people want to do research on their post offices in the mural. I mean, people have written PhD theses about this. So we couldn't do that in hopes of getting more photographic information. And that was really the challenge.
Challenging.
Please.
Yeah, I know,
Here.
and just,
That's
And all-
why I want them up here.
and then also a treasurer was Della, postmaster. She took, I'm sorry, yeah. And she took us through the building, the basement, the vault, all of that gave us a lot of history. And we had access to the original blueprints, which are in the building. And we had several meetings where we were allowed to read them, make notes. So the blueprints were enormously helpful.
And
I think, yeah.
Dion is the postmistress, and we got total support from her. And Della, who she mentioned, is the lady who used to be at the desk for like 25 years. Yeah, so that's that answer.
So what was your involvement with state agencies? We're at the halfway mark, so
Okay, but Emily, should we say?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's Emily.
Emily Whaley is your biggest resource. She will help you every step of the way. If you have a draft, the first couple of drafts of a couple of paragraphs, send them in. She will call you, she will talk you through it. She's wonderful. And she gives you, I heard you say previous applications, she has access to give you, here's the application from, other post offices and such. So I say Emily is your greatest resource.
what she's referring to is that the path forward for us is to do that planning schematic as a pre-registration form. So we're doing that extra step, which they did not do. And I think it was easier for you to go right to the registration form.
Yes.
Because it's a post office that has specific parameters.
Yes.
Put out there. So that's what she was referring to.
True.
How long did it take from the first working on the registration form until submitted?
Just to back up,
Yes.
Mayor Mills, is while we could go directly to the form, Emily did do probably that process that you're now going through, but in a different way. In other words, here's the basic information, and it passed a test. The initial research done clearly met that criteria. What makes the Rehoboth Post Office unique is that it's a federal building on federal property, and many of those buildings that are on the register are in historic districts, like up in Lewis. And so that's what makes our application unique, and which is why, we're like, 50-50 that it will pass through the U.S. Postal Service Historic Preservation Officer to then go to the next step.
Right.
That's just an aside there.
Yep, very good.
So from conception of the task force to our first submission was 1 year. That takes into account 3 months of maternity leave for Emily. So work-wise, I'm going to say 9 months from the submission.
But it also, I imagine, if anybody has questions, feel free to, I imagine it also has to do with your energy. If you
Energy and the
sat
time,
back,
you have
Yeah.
6 people that have very busy lives as well, and it was fitting that in as well, yes.
So can you share with us any details of the process? You mentioned that there was a state board you had to go in front of. I assumed that this was merely an application that was submitted, period.
Right.
And then we waited, sat back and waited for them to do something. But
Right.
can
Now, I'm
you
not going to use the
explain
correct
this?
terms here, but it turned out that the building is, how is that worded? That we turned out the building, it's not the building itself, it's because it's part of the community? What was that part that was
Those are weeds.
weeds?
Yeah,
Okay, don't worry about it, okay. I'm sorry, I just got back from Belgium on Friday, I'm not exactly functioning. I'm sorry, repeat the question,
I think,
Stan. Who did we
I
do?
read it and I don't remember much of it, but there's criteria.
I think
And it-
it's similar to what we're going to argue is that it's not for the architectural integrity, but rather it's the association with events or patterns of
that's
history, the
what we wound up
cultural
with, right? Is that
significance to the town.
I think you all had criteria A and C,
Okay.
which we haven't reviewed lately.
I don't think ours is finalized.
Okay, yeah. Currently, our application was with the Federal Preservation Officer. We are done, we're waiting to hear back. They said like 60 days-ish is what we're thinking, 60 to 90 days till we hear back. If whether, and it's either a yay or nay, is that correct? Or is there, we don't really know from that point.
Questions?
Any other questions?
I have another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you know if the post office has considered, and this is something we're going to discuss today that I'm curious about, is the federal tax credits that become available to nominated, places. I wonder if they could be used to help restore and preserve the building.
Well, the building is federal, we can't touch it. We had originally talked about trying to raise money to get in there and get it fixed, but they did send a guy down from Maine who is a preservation contractor kind of a thing, and he apparently made a huge list of things that need to be done. I mean, the roof leaks, there's, the list just goes on and on. But so far, nothing has been moved. He spent 2 days with Dion down here, making a list of what needs to be done. I do remember vaguely a number of about 5 million being thrown out, but we can't do anything. We can't fix it, we can't do anything to the building. And the preservation will not protect the building if the feds decide to sell it or whatever, correct? It's just an honor.
Right. Wesley?
Has the post office for Rehoboth Beach always been in that location?
No, there were 4 other locations. This is the
So
fifth.
does that impact anything about the application because it was not, Only because this, how long has this one been the location? How many years has?
1937 when it was built.
Okay.
But prior, there were 4, but Emily advised us to stay within the area of focus, basically. Statement of significance. So we did create a map showing the other 4 locations. That's in our application, but we didn't delve into that at all.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. This is very enlightening. We
Add?
appreciate it. Keep
Mary
us,
Jane, do you want to add something?
No, I just wanted to add that Cindy sells herself short. She and Susie Martin have been excellent leaders. They really are, kept the enthusiasm up, and they've been great leaders. I just wanted to not sell yourself short. Yeah.
Well, the last footnote is, we've submitted the draft application, it's still draft.
Yeah.
Everything's a draft until it's approved. Anyway, what was the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Postal Service, which was last year. And so there was a lot of excitement in the post office system, and particularly amongst our fellow neighbors and friends at the post office. This is a big deal to
They're
them.
excited.
They are excited, and so we're hopeful that it meets with approval at the higher levels. And the fact that the post office is really, it needs help, but except for the new mailboxes that were put in, most everything is original.
It's amazing.
And there are books written about the Treasury Department post office designs, and of course this one is Colonial Revival, which is probably appropriate for Delaware. And and everybody hated the mural when it was put in, but that was true for all communities, because the feds wanted the artists to broaden people's knowledge and association. So Rehoboth hated the mural, but that was true in Woodstock, Vermont, and Silver Spring, Maryland. They all hated the mural. So anyway, but our artist had a, as I said earlier, he had a following. So we were like higher up, which I always thought was very fascinating. Here's Rehoboth in 1937, but we have this post office, which is not insignificant when you go to other places and look.
There's 4 other post office identical to, 3 other identical to ours. They repeated the drawings.
In Delaware.
In Delaware, yeah. And Dion, by the way, wants to have a party, put up a tent and have food and have a big party if we get the sign and get it
Well,
up.
the other one is to have a first day cancellation of a stand.
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
Of which this cancellation of when the post office was inaugurated, that's in the postmaster's office, so.
Right. By the way,
I have a quick
Yes.
question, if I can. If you said that the federal government owns the property, and if they want to sell it, they can sell it, do you still have the ability to have a sign of registration left on that property?
I believe so.
I believe so.
It sounds, we think so.
Okay.
The other thing you asked about the Dover, when we went up to Dover, it turned out that was really just a check mark. It wasn't overly relevant to our project, would you say? But it was something we needed to do.
It wasn't a Delaware state property.
Right.
They're Delaware owned,
Right.
but the Historic Preservation Committee listened and offered comments and knew that, this was just, as she said, a checkoff. So.
Yeah.
so was that going to Dover process something that we're going to have to go through?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Okay. All righty.
And it's
Thank you.
It really is. It's very informal. I mean, literally, you sit in a room, they have a screen for people that want to zoom in, and you're around a table, and it's just like discussion.
Yeah.
Sounds
They're
good.
very,
It's very simple.
they're very
Yep.
supportive.
Thank you very
you.
much. We're
Thank
going to
you.
move on. You don't need to stay. You're free to go, but we are very appreciative of your time today. Thank you. Daniel?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Christopher?
that was a very good back and forth, where you posed questions
Yes.
and the presenters asked. You might want to do that with every one of our presenters, where you pose the questions and have them respond. Just a
Ahead
suggestion
of
that-
time or something?
Just to keep things moving along, since you posed a question, they answered, we moved on to the next question.
Sure.
I won't be long.
Oh, sorry, it wasn't trying to, you can speak as long as you want. I was just making.
No. So I'm Dan Parsons, Historic Preservation Planner for Sussex County. I've been here for almost 19 years. and I started with the National Register as soon as I got here in 2007, working with the National Register. Can I get, hit the, can I just advance it, right? Can I just, space bar? Gotcha. All right, I just wanted to go over, so the way I'm involved, I've written a few nominations, but generally I get contacted by people. I initiate them, or the Division of Historic Cultural Affairs involves me in some way. So I was involved with the post office here initially, and then again, Emily Whaley kind of took the reins of that project and helped them and guided them through it. So depending on what the needs are of the group, that's how I participate. This group looks like it's pretty well taken care of. You have some professionals on your team, and I think this nomination can be done in-house if we, work together. So like I said, I initiate them. I initiated a project with Woodland Church, T.S. Smith Farm, Bullseye Farm. Again, I work with the Division of Historic Cultural Affairs. We're touring 4 sites on Thursday for National Register. And then I was contacted by the constituents of Rehoboth Presbyterian Church, McCauley's Chapel, Godwin School, the McGee Farm. Again, most of the projects I've been involved with and contacted for were with protection from encroachment. And to the left is the Woodland Church. That's across from the Woodland Ferry in western Sussex County. So they contacted me, and I had an intern write the draft presentation, which is still in draft form. They've disassociated from the Methodist Church, so it's an amazing example. If you go inside the church, it's all original. It was built in 1878. To the right is T.S. Smith's farm in Bridgeville. That is a picture of a German POW. A German POWs built chicken houses on his farm during World War II. Wow. Just one example. In 1907, I did a Century Farm project and interviewed farmers from all over the county. His father, Charlie Smith's father, was one of them. And he told me about the 3 towns he had on his property. So we're doing a kind of a district nomination for that site too. And in the bottom is Bullseye Farm. That's over in Oak Orchard. Austin Fawcett Oakey. He gave around 400 acres away to the Nature Conservancy, and it is the original site of the ferry from Burton. It's Burton's Ferry that went across to the electric plant. There was a ferry there that went to St. George's Chapel. Anyway, the farm is pretty much intact. We're going to nominate that, hopefully, for archaeology, which hasn't been done in over 20 years, nominating a site for archaeology in Delaware. And then, so I have a list of partners. I work with the Delaware Preservation Fund. I'm on their board, and we changed the rules to include eligible sites for grants. So we can use the fund to nominate projects, and since then we've done several. And I work with CHAD, the Center for Historic Architecture and Design. We're writing a grant to the National Trust for a threatened resource report. And we've used funding with CHAD to do oral histories. I'd like to get in that a little later. And then we inventory all the areas, National Register sites, and work with the DPA for historic markers. I work with, so a lot of what I do is, we call it Section 106 review for county projects. And that the National Register, if you are listed, you are protected in that regard. If there are federal funds used for any project, they have to take into account to mitigate effect to that resource. So that I'm working on, and same thing with community housing development. I work with them to, I say, kind of encapsulate historic properties to protect them in neighborhoods that are distressed. And they're a great partner with me and so even within our listed properties, we work together to encapsulate and protect the resource. And then I wanted the Rehoboth Presbyterian Church, just briefly, they're being encroached upon. They're trying to leave the Presbyterian charge as well, but they want to put the parameters, set some boundaries around the church. And that comes into effect, same thing with the barn at SCI, the Sussex Correctional Institute. That used to be an almshouse. I was contracted by the warden, and that barn is the last remnant of the almshouse. It was so they tore the Greek Revival house down in 1979. That's where the almshouse overseer lived. There was a whole compound, there's 2 cemeteries. So I'm working with, so SCI is a good example of taking an adaptive reuse of that barn. So they do aquaculture there, and they actually stock every pond in Delaware with bass and trout. They do aquaculture, they do furniture, they do car rebuilding, it's insane. So they're gonna take that barn and use it for feeding the homeless. So they're gonna take all the food and then use it as a distribution center. The McGee farm down on the left, that is on Lighthouse Road. That house is before 1868. It's on the Atlas. So that farm, Ellen McGee, the properties, land farm preservation can't afford to buy it. So we're going to try and do a register, a district nomination on that farm to just put some boundaries around it to protect it from development. And so we're going to look at that on Thursday. So the Godwin School is another example. Plantation Lakes, it sits right in front of Plantation Lakes. When we did the nomination on the church, I worked with them. They contacted me. We got a nomination done. And they had a 99-year lease with a family, and now the land has been sold, and then no one knows that lease. So the only boundaries are what's in our nomination. So they did parcel out the 2 acres and give it to the school. So for that nomination, it wouldn't have been protected as much. So 1,350 structures in the county are on the National Register. Every town has been surveyed. There are 9 districts. Rehoboth doesn't have a district, but Georgetown doesn't. Georgetown did an overlay district. I worked with them, and they basically took the 1868 atlas and laid it on the town. Seaford, I've been trying to work with them to get a district. Millsboro, again, we've been nominating and listing individual properties within the town, but to try and put together a coherent district. I'm just kind of briefly, this is just going over what I've been dealing with. County ordinance. So our comp plan's up for review in the next 2 years. So the last time we put a demolition delay ordinance for historic properties. So that was something that would give me the ability. I'm working with a family in Bridgeville who wants to tear down a barn that was built in 1880, and it's National Register. So I'm trying to fix a barn. I'm going to Schofield. We need to fix a barn there. So I'm trying to use parts from places. It's just a little, Sussex is a big county. So there's all kinds of things. I might be taking part of a house in Millsboro. Anyway, my major point is the criteria for NR has changed over time. And Mr. Ellison and I sat on the State Review Board for some time. I think 6 years I was on it and reviewed. I learned so much from being in that position. But anyway, now we're looking at the National Register is just turned 80 years old itself, 1966, and the National Preservation Act. So the things that are coming up that are eligible now, like vinyl siding, you're going to be seeing windows, and it's insane. So the last time we redid the state plan for preservation, that's what we were trying to take into account. For example, Georgetown. If they took the 1868 atlas and threw it on the town, when we surveyed the town, it's really the only town in Sussex County that's grown since World War II. So their district would be huge, including the Catholic Church and all the houses that were built in the 50s and 60s. Again, Georgetown grew where other towns didn't. So the districts look completely different. They're much larger. The largest historic district in Delaware is in Laurel, 800 structures. So today's standards have changed. If they didn't include certain sections, the oldest house in Laurel is not on the National Register. So that's the politics of the boundaries, too, that go back 50 years. Again, there are over 12,000 sites in the county that are documented as historic structures, but that is rapidly rising because of creeping of time. So my experience briefly, my first nomination was Macaulay's Chapel, and that was a Methodist church outside of Georgetown. And again, encroachment, Del Dot was widening roads. They have a cemetery, so we nominated the cemetery and the church for protection. And they actually have a POW camp, the German POW camp. They move buildings around, and the one sits there as their community hall. Anyway, I've been the planner since 7. I was on his State Review Board, 13 to 19. My first nomination, Macaulay's Chapel, I started doing oral histories and including them in nominations. Oh, and the last nomination I worked on, it was just finished in 2025, White House Beach. That's Mark Schau and our group that built in 1717. His 11th grandfather owned Long Neck. So we're trying to tell the story of the evolution of I mean, you look at beach culture, that the house in 1717, then they started building beach cottages, and then they turned it into 500 boat slips. And, you know, it's just the evolution of property here. And it's been in the same family since 1677. So, and they do maintain it. It's a beautiful site. But anyway, we're trying to do archaeology there later on, so White House. But Macaulay's Chapel is a great example. I went in, and Florence Webb, who contacted me, I did a great oral history. She's telling me about, you know, taking the carriages to the church and the centrality of religion to the communities there, just outside of Georgetown. And in the Richard Allen School, finally, when I talk about, these are just the nominations that stand out. I worked with Richard Allen to basically I did an oral history project with them when I taught at Del State. They cut out preservation programs at University of Delaware and Del State too. They only have certificate programs anyway. So when I was teaching, we were teaching graduate level preservation, and the oral history is what I stress. And Richard Allen's a great example of just, if you didn't talk to the people, you wouldn't know what the community looked like. And I think I want to stress that here, that oral history would be invaluable. And I think one of the things I could do was help set up an oral history project and document the people that remember the town and all aspects of it. And I want to say Section 106, National Register sites. We have, I'm working in Lewis right now doing archaeology for, you know, they're doing them anyway. So the permits that they need, we have to do archaeology. We have to take into account the structures. So Section 106 of the National Preservation Act. Again, Bullseye Farm hasn't been listed, no sites. I said E, it means D. So anyway, it might as well be E. It's like below everything else. And the property dispute, Richard Allen School, we did an oral history project. In the middle of it, Senator Booth gave the school to the Boys and Girls Club. So we put together a presentation and alerted the media and pressured the government to give the school back to Richard Allen. And so there was town meetings. We documented the whole process. There was a couple of people passed away. I went to funerals. It was insane. And the stories that we collected from, it's just, again, in Godwin School, the land dispute, the National Register. For here, again, the only place I can think in Delaware that even resembles is the Arden in Newcastle. The artist community up in Sinclair lived there, but it's not nominated for the properties. It's nominated for the cultural landscape. So if we could think of, again, that's all I have. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Dan. You mentioned of Mark Shaw. Is that our Mark Shaw?
Schau, yes. Mark Schau?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same one. Very good. And you also mentioned that you were on the same state board as Jim Ellison. Was that
He was president.
coincide or
Yes, yes.
you were president at that time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure of the exact.
Reba Hollingsworth and yeah, I remember, yeah.
Any questions of Dan?
I think
Mike?
one point that you're making that I think we should really be integrating is the oral history. That's a different component than we typically do, but it makes a lot of sense with this particular application. So I think that that's an asset that we should be taking advantage of when we do this.
Very good. Anybody else? Wesley?
Can I ask a question about the oral history part? What is relevant? Is it direct someone who had been, for example, in our case for the Boardwalk, people, what would be the oral history lesson or tip for us as to who we are asking to get oral history from as it relates to this?
So my first part of the process would be to gather a group together and kind of brainstorm themes and people. But the first thing that with the Boardwalk, the storms, the first responders, the neighborhoods that were destroyed, everything. I mean, for example, West Rehoboth was African-American, significant, large, and it's gone. So I'm just saying about the town, we have an opportunity to get the octogenarians, whoever we can, to remember what it was because the landscape is so different. And I think about Rehoboth, we were talking about the first condos, right? Or the first, you can't even get furniture up the stairs. It's like, it's just for a bag, man, I'm gone. So this place has evolved. The gay community, Central African American, I mean, there's so much to discover here. And I think it parallels, if we could think of the whole coast as an area, heritage area, if you will. So, because the storms affected everyone, right? Dewey, Lewis. So, in the same first responders, I think it's just imperative that we get that. The last storm, the major storm was 62. So, who was alive that remembers that? And when was the Boardwalk last? So that Boardwalk is a place that people come to and identify with, and that's what we're trying to make the case for, right? And the stories are going to be what bring it home. And you can use it for interpretation. You can use it for publications. Now I got transcription software. We can make a book out of the stories of Rehoboth, just like that. And, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything, right? Anyway.
Heidi, the museum has an oral history program. Is it searchable, if you will, for people that had stories about the Boardwalk or?
Well, we're trying to make our collections all searchable eventually, and we are actually trying to find a new oral historian to continue that project because we do have over 200 oral histories, which is so significant. I don't know about Dan's experience, but I don't know of another historical society with that many oral histories available, but they are not currently searchable, but we can look at the transcripts, so still research them sort of the old-fashioned way.
I was a folklorist for the Eastern Shore right out of graduate school, and we have a repository at Salisbury University, but there used to be a folklorist for the state, but DENREC, they never replaced, I think Stephen Miller, when I came here, was a folklorist. So all their repository for oral histories, they're scattered all over the state. We don't have anything. So I always reposit everything I do at the NAB Center at Salisbury University. We have transcription. They have a folklorist there, Jennifer, anyway. So what I do is I take all my oral histories, I get the consent forms, I give them to her, and she gives me the transcriptions. So, anyway.
Very good. Thank you, Dan. Anybody else? Jim?
I just want to emphasize, as one who spent my time reviewing applications, the importance of this notion of the oral histories, because oftentimes reading at length the actual nominations can be rather a stifling process. And so when you can enliven that with real stories, I think that is a very positive contribution to the whole. So we just need to keep that in mind.
Thank you very much.
I was just going to add just something aside. My neighbor has passed away a few years ago, but she would tell me, at 95, she would tell me stories about World War II and the military and how her father would feed the military because they wanted, the family wanted the military to meet Florence. Anyway, they were trying to get her married off. And the stories were hysterical, but also was so interesting. And she would talk about the Black Beach. She would talk about having a tiny little shed is where they had to go and change their clothing. I mean, the stories were amazing. And I'm sorry that I don't have those written down, but I have what she has told me, and how they used to have blackouts and they would party and they would have to put blackouts up. And it was just an amazing history. And if we can find out details of more of this, maybe from somebody who's still alive, would be perfect.
Michael, Marco will put up Michael's, it should say Michael Burton presentation.
I forgot tax credits.
So I did the presentation in two parts specifically.
Are you able to find it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's perfect.
This is 160 pages. but
Yeah, we're gonna,
gonna-
watch
gonna
how brief
reduce
I
it
am.
Just a little bit. Go ahead, Michael.
So I did it in two parts. One was to show you sort of the depth of work that we've done around the country in this field. We come from it, I come from it from a totally different perspective. I'm coming from the developer who's trying to get tax credits for getting cash out of that and making projects work, right? So that I'm coming from that perspective. And then the Paul Lawrence Dunbar School complex, I think is really relevant to what we're trying to do in Rehoboth Beach. So the first package was just to kind of give you an overview of projects that I've done. If you have questions about them, you can ask me. But this is the one I think that we should focus on today about what we did here. It was successful. It was just 2 years ago. And it was complex in the sense that it was city-owned property, privately owned property being sold off by public, and a nonprofit owning another piece of property. And so stakeholders, right? Who are the stakeholders? And having to get all of them on board to create a district. So this isn't just a building, it's a district. And I would think that we should be thinking about the Boardwalk as a district, not as a thing. And then it's a matter of, well, who are those stakeholders and why are we doing it, right? So in our case, we wanted to do it so that the building would be eligible for tax credits, okay? So it was not a historic district. It was just, you had the acting high school that's still running, the elementary school that had been abandoned 20 years ago, 25 years ago, the middle school, and part of that school being torn down, the older part actually, and then another building that was the middle school that had been converted, it sold off and converted into a nonprofit. So that's sort of the campus of buildings that we then wanted to create a district out of so that we would be eligible for our building for tax credits, if that makes sense. So the biggest challenges of that were to convince the stakeholders why we were doing it and how it had an advantage to the overall neighborhood, so to speak. The biggest neighbor was Johns Hopkins University, so they had a clear, like, if they didn't want it to happen, if they wanted that property, they could put their force on it. And so we worked with them, and ultimately what came out of that was that it would be workforce housing for the hospital. So they'd have a place for workers that they didn't have a place for. But it's really important to think about the stakeholders and why you're doing it. Like all the owners that own along the Boardwalk, right? They're all stakeholders in this thing. And what is the size of the district, right? Because the town's not a district, right? Right now, the town's not a district. So is it just a Boardwalk? Is it the Boardwalk and the buildings that are along the Boardwalk? Another thing to think about, like, I was thinking to myself when they were saying they wanted to make the post office a historic landmark, right? It's a federally owned building in the town, still owned by the feds. So even with that designation, it doesn't protect the building, right? The strongest protection for a building or a site is going to be the town having its own restrictions on a particular site, right? You can tear down a federally historic building. Now, people can then rally and use that to stop it, but you can do it, right? Whereas if it's a local historic landmark, good luck. You're not tearing it down. And so why are they doing that there? I guess they're doing it to get a designation. It sounds like they want to renovate the building, but it actually, if you think about it, that's actually putting a restriction on the federal government to sell the building in the future, because you could think of it as a positive that, okay, you can get that credit if you bought that building, or that building has restrictions on it, so you can't do anything with that building in the future, right? Because the town would obviously then layer over on top of that. So we all have to be asking ourselves, why are we doing this? What is the intent of why we're making the Boardwalk a designated landmark? How it affects the stakeholders, how it improves the stakeholders' position of what they own and for what the town wants to be 50 years, 100 years from now. The oral history is huge. When you think about, so for this particular project, it was all about Black history, creating schools for the Black community that was totally underserved in Baltimore City, right? And they came in and they did this. And so the testimonials we had from like one of the previous mayors went to the school, right? So that we got a letter of recommendation or a letter of support to do it, right? That was actually an oral history, if you think about it, because he wrote all about why he went there and his history there and all that. The building itself, the whole inside had been completely gutted in the 1990s, late 1980s, early 1990s. So basically inside, significantly, there was nothing there. It was really just a shell of a building, right? So, and I've done other buildings where we've gotten the tax credits all the way through, and there's barely anything left. Roof's gone, whole building inside's gone. I have a front facade. So even though most of the property is like the boardwalk has been demolished, I don't think that precludes us from getting it done. I think if we hold on to the oral history and the cultural significance of it, we have a very strong case, right, to do it. I've done buildings where and this is kind of similar to that, where they voted against a building being in the district, where there's a whole district and then bullseye, this one building that we want to develop is not considered a significant building within the district because the owner at the time opposed it and was strong enough with a good lawyer to keep himself out of the district because he didn't want the restraints from the district. And then, so now they voted against this. The feds have said, no, it's not significant. So now you have to go back and prove to them why it is significant. And we've done that successfully, right? So it's possible to do that. Another project that I didn't highlight was Evanston Village Shopping Center. And yeah, and that was, that was the mayor and the governor there because we now have a grand opening. That building was actually redlined. They built the shopping center, which was one of the first shopping centers in the country, and the entire neighborhood around it. And they actually put in the deeds that a Black owner couldn't own the houses, but also couldn't own the property. And it took the mayor going door to door because nobody trusted anybody going door to door to tell them to sign a note saying that it was okay for a Black person to own the shopping center. That was changed in 2023, believe it or not, right? And up until then, we couldn't do anything to sort of move the building forward. The planning department was like, hands off. And we actually stopped the nomination on that particular site because the feds were basically like, you can't do X, Y, and Z to the property in the future, which is the plan that we wanted to do. And so it was like that would put a lien essentially on the property in the future that we did not want. So we actually stopped the process. And we've completely developed that property, kept all the historic buildings, but also added new pad sites in the parking lot where trolleys were in the old days. So there's, why are you doing it? The thesis for why you're doing it is the most important thing. And then who are the stakeholders and how can we get everybody on board that it's a really good thing? Because if people come out and oppose you for this, it will go nowhere. And the first person that opposed you was the federal government, as we all know, right? Because a report was written that there's no significance to the boardwalk to build windmills, right? So that report has to get negated, essentially. You have to have a counter to that report. And do we have that report? We should get a copy of it if we don't, so we can counter the argument to that report. So that's, I can go through all this. It's very detailed, and this really takes you through it, and I can answer any questions you have about how we do this process. I typically am like at 50,000 feet, and I have the staff all doing all the detail, but I'm guiding them through that process. And I like to think of this as like the 50,000 feet. I want to pose to you guys, why are you doing it? To make sure that we're doing it for the right reasons and what is actually encompassed in it. Can you imagine going through this whole process and you realize, we actually wanted this part as a part of it too, but shoot, now we got to go through the whole process again to do that piece. So you should be thinking about why you're doing it and what the extent of it should be. I'm open to questions.
Wesley?
You seem to have a lot of experience. In my head, I'm trying to imagine as a developer, this takes a lot of work to do something. It must be obviously financially beneficial to do it in that sense. But based on all this experience that you had, and there was a lot of background there, I appreciate that. What do you see as the biggest objection that we might get from the stakeholders as to what's it? I'm assuming part of that is building restrictions along the boardwalk to buildings that are there. And if that is the one thing, what's the answer to that stakeholder to say, well, really, it is a restriction, but it's not going to be that big of a restriction? I'm curious, what do you see as the biggest opposition that this might receive in the community?
First, you have to define what the boardwalk is. Is the boardwalk the boardwalk? Is the boardwalk the storefronts on the boardwalk? What is the boardwalk? What's the definition of the boardwalk, right? And then there's creep, because, you know, people think about creep, right? So now you say there's nothing, but then in the future, you come along and you layer something over top of it. How does that work? And being able to answer those questions honestly, I think is important, so that it's to the advantage of the stakeholders. Like I've had like that nonprofit that we dealt with, they didn't want anything to do with it, right? On Dunbar, they didn't want anything to do with it. And we had to convince them that ultimately there was a value to them for that. The community, this would allow for the community to be renovated, built up, safer, because there was a lot of issues over there. The city saw it as economic development, so they got on board. First, it took a while, but then we talked to the right people, then they got on board. But you gotta sort of define what are we doing so that you can talk to the stakeholders.
So
Wesley?
just as a follow-up to that, can I just follow up on a question?
Yeah.
So to me then, having the boardwalk be the designation up to the edge of the businesses is a sound argument to those businesses to say, because this boardwalk is here, your business is successful without the boardwalk being. So I could see the argument being just the actual structure. Anything that creeps into any of those buildings, to me, sounds like it's a quagmire with a lot of opinions as to what could be wrong. But as we look at other designations, I'd be curious to see if they delineated it just with the actual structure.
Yeah.
And was that a positive or negative in the application, or does the adjoining structures help or hinder the application?
And to be clear, I think it's a big positive. I think there's a huge argument why this is done, right? That's why I'm on this board, because I think this is a really positive thing to do for the community, for everybody that's in that community. But you gotta sell it the right way and have the right answers
I'd like
to all the
to
questions.
add something there. Wesley, you started your question that a nomination by the Historic Register the National Register, might impose restrictions on business owners, and that is not the case. And I'm going to use Michael's example of the post office when he was talking about how that's a federal building and that the National Register nomination doesn't protect that building. I think that you might be thinking about historic landmark designation, which does impose restrictions of one kind or another on the facade of a building. But local business owners there may be that perception that it could cause restrictions, but it really doesn't. And Michael,
That's correct. I mean, there's layers to what you were just saying. It's like, if you wanted to donate or designate your facade of your building, right? Like if you're in a historic neighborhood and you want to do your building and get the credit back, you may do an easement on your own building, your house, to do that. That's probably what you're talking about there. The state can have easements. We're doing what is it called? The Institute of Notre Dame, Nancy Pelosi's elementary school, my aunt's elementary school, and we're converting that into affordable housing for seniors. It's in a very tough part of the city, right? But the state, after that place closed in 2020, they then put an easement over the entire property, inside and out. So we have to follow all those restrictions within our own property, right? So there can be multiple different layers, and then the town can also designate something for themselves to make it so that you can't demolish it or whatever to the property. So it's a layers of how that goes down the road, and it changes over time, right? So.
Ms. Mayor, I have a question. So I want to clarify, I think that's an important point. Hypothetically speaking, if we were to secure National Registry designation for what's considered the boardwalk only, I'm to understand then there would be no restrictions or inhibitions or any effect on property owners, including those who directly abut our designated area. Is that correct?
tried to get what? I didn't understand you, Christopher.
If we were able to secure National Registry designation for what we colloquially consider the boardwalk, only the actual boardwalk, there would be no restrictions or no inhibitions on other property owners, including those who immediately abut that designated area.
Well, we won't apply for just the boardwalk. We are already at the point where the state said that approach would not work because that would be criterion C as a piece of architecture, and we know because of the multiple storms that have destroyed the boardwalk over time that the integrity of the original boardwalk is no longer present. So what we are thinking of doing is nominating it as a district, but we have to work on that together as a task force that takes into consideration the reason why it was built in 1873 and why it has continued to be rebuilt in the same exact place over and over again
So
to
I
the present
understand
day.
I understand that point. I understand the distinction that the state drew the first time around. I think that's an arguable point, which is to say I think we could define the boardwalk district as being only the boards of the boardwalk. I mean, I believe that I accept the argument that physically there's nothing remaining of the historic structure, but one could argue on that site, the site being narrowly defined as the path of the current boardwalk, that is nonetheless historically significant to the city and to the region and to the nation. But under that definition, it would only be the district would be only the actual path of the boardwalk. But you've answered my question so you answered one question. My second question is, if we were to secure a National Registry designation, regardless of the specific boundaries, the actual path of the current boardwalk or something broader that's considered a district of the boardwalk, the city, all property owners within that district, including the city, would be subject to provisions of the National Registry. Correct? So in other words, if the city wanted to replace the streetlights on the boardwalk, they would have to invoke a National Registry process to choose appropriate lighting.
No, because the National Register is nominating the district or the property for its significance, but it doesn't, I forget who was talking earlier about, maybe it was Dan, about a building being torn down, or maybe it was that you could still put a sign up there that said that it had once been there. I mean, that's not enough to protect it in and of itself.
If you have a designation, it does, I believe it's a 5-year timeline on it. There is a process you do go through. So like if you wanted to change things within that district, you would have to go through that federal process to make those changes. I would think you would. I know that when I do any buildings or that building in the district, if we were going to change something, it will go through that process.
So no new benches on the
After
boardwalk?
5 years, that process is extinguished. You still have the designation, but you are no longer required to meet. It basically gives you a 5-year window, and then after that, now that's a credit, right? That's about money and all that kind of business. But you do, if we wanted to go back and change a building that we got designated, let's say we built the building and now we want to do an addition in the front parking lot 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we would have to submit that through the SHPO and the feds for approval because we created a district that's now in. Can't just build a building in the district that you've created. You'd have to go through a process. And then another thing I was thinking about that's like tricky is where's the property line? Like is the board, like who owns the beach? Is that the Army Corps of Engineers? Huh? Well, who is in charge of the beach, right? Is it the Army Corps of Engineers? Are they a stakeholder? I don't know, right? Because there's a line. There's going to be a line where is the edge? Where's the definition of the boardwalk responsibility? And if that could be a stakeholder in this whole thing that we're not even thinking about. Let's just think about that.
Probably
I've run into the Army
primary
Corps.
dune. It's probably the primary dune.
Yeah,
Dune, yeah.
yeah.
Well, if you think about if you were seeking a nomination because you wanted to protect the view shed, which was the issue when the feds were thinking about putting wind turbines out 2 miles off of the shore, that's something to consider. And we're approaching this from a different point of view, I think, maybe than you normally do, Michael. But I think your experience will be very helpful. Like, how do you protect a town from federal projects that might devastate the cultural tourism that's so critical to our success here?
And is that one of the reasons why you want to do this?
Well, personally, that has been in the back of my mind, but as a historian, I think the boardwalk is very culturally significant to this town. It's the reason why this town was formed.
Right, right.
I was not chair of the Boardwalk Committee when they wanted to present it to the commissioners to pursue historic designation, but I followed some of it, and I swear I think the intent was as simple as that's a neat thing to do, and we can market the town. One more thing to market the town with it. Hey, we've got a boardwalk that's on the National Register. So I don't know that they gave it enough thought or went as deep as what you're.
So like from our perspective, what was the purpose of us wanting to create a district? It was to make a building eligible for tax credits. That was our motivation. From the state and the federal perspective, they don't care about that. What they care about is, does it meet the standards, right? And so from us, from a marketability standpoint, makes a lot of sense. From a protection standpoint of like the coastline, makes a lot of sense. But like at the end of the day, it's got to meet the standards. And like to how to do this application, how to divide it up, it's going to be writing the application, doing the oral history documentation, doing the photographic and historic, like research documentation, right? Sort of those are the big pieces to the puzzle that we're going to have to do and pull it together so it's cohesive. It's great that we have resources and potential grant money and things like that to do it, because it's a lot of work. I showed that the whole thing so you could see how much work it is. It's a lot of work, and we've been through the entire process, right? And like, we got voted on at the state before it even went to the feds, that it met all the standards that the state was comfortable, but the state was talking to the feds at the time, and we were also talking to them. So we're like making sure that like we were meeting the parameters that they were thinking, right? And so, and the fact that we have all these connections is great to that. So we're not in the dark. And so, from my perspective, I can definitely assist in sort of how to put the whole thing together so that it's cohesive and that it'll be successful. One thing I will say, I'll pat myself on the back, we've gotten every single one through for 30 years that we wanted. We've pulled them when we didn't want them, realized that was a bad idea, but every other one we've gotten through, and there've been some really sticky ones along the way that were like hard to prove that there was anything left of the building of significance, right? Sometimes clients are bringing us projects that are like, whoa, what's there, So does that help? Hopefully that helps.
Wesley and then Wayne.
So given my being in this city for the last 38 years and seeing how this community responds to change, communications about what this is and what this isn't is probably critical to the success of it should we move forward. Because there's a lot of misunderstanding about what this is and what it does versus national landmark designation. And anybody who starts to hear about something they don't like is going to start a narrative about why this should even, if it's not accurate, we need to understand what are the questions that people might be asking and how can we quickly tell them that's not correct, even at this stage in the process, because as we all know, when somebody gets a position in the city about something that's often not correct, it is a whisper down the lane thing, and all of a sudden there's a faction of people who are passing on an untruthful statement that is hard to get people to listen to. So I just think it's very important as this becomes more public. I'm a PR person by background. Communications, storytelling is critical, but facts are critical at this point. So it would be helpful for us to, because I actually just Googled right now to see what would the designation prevent somebody from doing, and it's an unclear answer to anybody that would Google it. So if I'm sitting on this task force, so I just think that we should be mindful of that as a role for this task force, and to start thinking about and obviously you are an immense resource of that, but at a future point, it might be helpful to understand what were the biggest concerns people brought to you and how did you answer them, so that we can start to form our own FAQs. And there could be a working living document, but it's important to have that at least as a starting point so that you have a baseline, and then it can be corrected and updated as it's needed. But and I think people can understand what kinds of things that are said in this town about things that aren't true, and it's very frustrating when it is untrue. So
I think that Wesley's bringing up a really important point, right? When I say we need oral history, we need to actually do the documentation. We need to do the historical research. We also need to be able to present to the community why we're doing it. and what that impact means to you, what positive impact it means to the community. That's the other piece of it. And that has to go in tandem with what we're doing.
Before I get to you, Wayne, you hit the nail on the head. Back at the Boardwalk Committee, that's not this committee, the separate Boardwalk Committee, went to the commissioners to get them to authorize forming this board. There were members of the audience that were very negative about this. Their comments were, you don't do a historic designation unless you're trying to preserve something and further restrict what you can and can't do. So that's something, I think, a future topic that we absolutely need to have for additional discussion and clarify it and answer the question why.
Yes.
And then address what you have. Wayne?
I just wanted to add to respond to Chris's question about can the study be confined just to the boardwalk, physically to the boardwalk itself. And I'm going to read a sentence from this document the mayor provided to us last time that answers that. It says, "My name is Suzanne Savory, and I'm the director of the Division of Historical and Cultural Affairs, as well as the State Historic Preservation Officer." And then I highlighted a sentence that came up in the body of the document that says, "Their consultant did recommend the boardwalk as not eligible for listing in the National Register due to lack of integrity." And I think that's what that's saying is we have to be looking in a more holistic way beyond just the structure of the boardwalk to what the setting is for the boardwalk and how important it is to the vitality of the city as a whole.
And that document that's up here, I highlighted the FAQ at the bottom of what this committee needs to know. If you can scroll down to that, you mentioned that as the, can you scroll this document? Oh, God.
Yeah, sorry.
At the very end, you said, what is this?
It's all the way at the end,
What does
right?
this committee have to, it's relevant, there was a heading that says what, the executive summary, at the very beginning. There was a.
Okay, hold on.
You said, what is
I
this?
don't remember my own
What is
thing.
relevance to this committee? It was the
Where
last
was it?
section of that front page document, right there.
Right, I saw it.
Number 13. And so that was raised, Wayne, in there about the integrity part, which is, when you talk about what this is, it's the one that says, document more than minimum required comprehensive, it was the, beyond the architecture, number 2. The strongest nominations connect the physical resource to the people, events, and broader historical themes that give the property its significance.
Exactly.
To me, that stood out in this document for me, because that's really what we have here.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I don't, the question is only how large a district has to be to encompass the concept of the boardwalk without the physical.
Oh, yeah, that's
I don't disagree that it's quite clear that the boardwalk as a physical structure is not historic because it was all replaced in 1990 something or other. Right, Mr. Mayor? The boardwalk was physically rebuilt. You showed us slides, the first, pardon me?
2012.
You mean from storm, 62
No,
storm,
You showed us on our
92
first,
storm?
you showed us on our first meeting here some photographs that you'd taken when the boardwalk was reconstructed 20-some years ago. Concrete.
2010-ish.
2010-ish. So there's no doubt that the physical thing known as the boardwalk is not historic because it was built in 2010. I don't disagree with the concept that there's a concept of the boardwalk as a concept, which is the Center of Historic Center of Civic and Cultural Life in Rehoboth Beach. The question is only how you define the physical boundaries of the concept of the boardwalk. I'm not disagreeing that physically it doesn't meet the criteria of a historic structure from a physical sense.
Right. Thank you, Michael. We got food for thought, and we're going to have to come back to this at a future
said enough.
meeting. Thank you very much. We'll go to Wayne. Do you want to do your thing, and then?
All right. And I'll go as briefly as I possibly can. I was involved, I practiced architecture in the old historic district of Old Town Alexandria from,
Wait, I think
You have 3, Marco.
Marco's going to put up your.
Which one? We have 3 things. One is Esplanade, one is,
Victorian House first, Prince Street School second, I think.
Pick one.
Two things.
Victorian
I don't
House?
care which one. Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that one's fine. We'll do that. In 1981, I was involved in a historic preservation certification for the Prince Street School in Alexandria. It was a public school building that was converted into an office building and updated to meet modern codes, including the exiting code. The building only had one stair. And so we put a new stair on the back of the building that had a large glass enclosure, modern. The conversion was updated to the recently new accessibility code from that period. And we were learning as we,
I went to that school.
you went?
Virginia Tech.
Oh.
The building.
Oh, okay. I'll be darned.
So I went to grad school.
Yeah, well, the developer sold the building to a political organization who occupied it for about 10 years after the work that I did was completed. The significance here was, well, several things. It was a building that had triple hung windows, old wood windows, and conservation-wise would be very difficult to preserve. So we wanted to go with modern insulating glass windows. It needed a new stair. It needed accessibility compliance. And so when we looked at, also it had large classrooms which couldn't be divided very well into offices, small offices, during this office boom that was going on in our city at that time. So what the developer decided was that he had a choice of a 20% tax credit for something historically significant or 10% tax credit for something that was not historically significant. And he chose that route, and it went through and got approved without any discussion really about what it was or where it was. 10 years later, BPI, the architecture school, bought the building and turned it into a school. And so I'm very happy that we preserved the classrooms as classrooms and the utility of the building as a school. So that was the first one. The second one was a Victorian house. There are pictures that go with that, by the way, that you could thumb through. Okay, that is the school building. We put a new stair on the front, new planters on the front. We took some debilitated parts away. If you would scroll one more time, if you can, you might get it. There you go. There's a whole facade rendering of when it was. Excuse me.
That's the original building?
That's the original rendering of the original building.
It's like a Pope's card.
Yeah. And scroll again, please. Notice it's a school for white girls. This is from the 1920s, I think. Populations were segregated, not only by black and white, but by male and female in Alexandria at that time. You know, the town of Robert E. Lee. So we've lived through that. Okay, continue on, please. Those paragraphs are about how to apply for the historic preservation tax credits. Continue on, please. That is a more recent rendering of the school. Notice it had a gazebo on top, which the developer did not want to restore. It had fallen down. And continue. That's the end. Okay, go to the next one, which is a Victorian house, large house. It was built in 1890. It's in the Old Historic District. It was owned by a single family until it was sold to the architectural firm of Russ Sterling and Neal, my firm, in 1981. It's a Queen Anne. Go to the photograph, please. There we go, that page. It was an existing house of about 6,000 square feet, which is very large. And it had a vacant lot on either side of it. We built an addition of about 6,000 square feet on the right side, and the left side was turned into parking. And again, we're in an era of commercial office development in the old and historic district after having left a decade or two of residential development and renovation. It has a lot of traditional details in it, window arches of cast stone, a mansard roof, which we duplicated in a modern glass roof. And I was very happy to have made my office behind that glass roof at the time, and brought a lot of natural light to the third floor, which was my firm's floor. Now, we intended on renting the building, but we weren't very successful at it. But a buyer came along who said, I will buy the building, and the incentive for me to buy it is I would get the historic preservation tax credit of 20%. And so we, at that point, that was the logical decision to make, and we became the lessees of that building for several years until we moved on to another project. And I think that's the significance of that one also. That one did have the 20% tax credit, so it illustrates two different ways to go if in the private sector to get tax credits. The final document that I have, I'd like to pass around, and this has been discussed some to this point about the boardwalk, and is it the boardwalk that we're certifying, or is it a place that we're certifying? And I spent a lot of time, I was very lucky in my education to have Charles Moore as a famous architect who designed the square in New Orleans. Can't think of the name of it right offhand, but anyway, famous new public square. The dean of the school brought my whole class around Europe looking at public places. And so my whole early background education was on settings or places, and just as much as on buildings and structures. And I have carried that through for my career. So as I looked at the beach, I thought the boardwalk by itself is not that significant. It is the setting. And I looked for a word that would describe what this setting of Rehoboth Beach is. And the one that came to mind was esplanade. And that's what I've stated on the top of this page. A long, open, level paved area, walkway, or a linear park typically situated next to a river, harbor, or waterfront designed for pedestrian recreation. They offer leisurely walking spaces and scenic views. And sounds like Rehoboth to me. May not be a word that we've used so far, and I had to sit and think and Google a few things to come up with the word esplanade, but it seems to fit. And as I look at this picture, looking down on the beach and its setting and the primary dunes and the boardwalks and the structures, that it is a composition of different elements that make this significant. Heidi and I were kicking this around, and perhaps there's a way for the individual property owners along the boardwalk to take advantage of the investment tax credits one way or the other that would incentivize them to make improvements to their buildings, preferably in terms of quality, but it could be in terms of scale as well. So with that said, that's what I have to say.
Okay. Thank you, Wayne. Any questions?
I have a overall
Michael?
question. So does Rehoboth Beach have a federal Main Street program? It sounded like they did.
We have a
We
Main
have a
Street.
national.
Is it a national one?
Yeah.
It is.
Well,
So like, then it has boundaries, right?
the Main Street office is right next to the museum. And Cindy Lovett, who was just here, is on the board of Main Street. So her Rehoboth and Bloom program is part of Main Street. And their task is to bring people downtown so the businesses get business. But they had meetings at the museum where other main streets came to visit. And I know Dan Slagle, who's their director, went and gave a presentation at a national meeting. So I don't know if it's federal. I never heard that, but I do know it's a national organization. And Mayor Mills, do you know more about it than that?
I was on, for Federal Hill, they have a Federal Hill Main Street. It's a national program. There's like 4 of them in Baltimore City. And they have a lot of benefits. So I'm wondering if you have that right now, and they have boundaries. So what are the boundaries of that Main Street? Is it Rehoboth Avenue? Probably, right? And it's interesting when you were just talking about the Boardwalk and the context and all those storefronts, one of the benefits in Baltimore City for Federal Hill Main Street is there are grants they're called facade grants. And so it's a way of getting grant money to improve the facade of your building.
Yeah, they have signed grants,
Yeah. and just-
$500 or
Just,
something.
yep, and just fixing up, whether it's new windows, new storefront, whatever, and there's grants, painting, there's grants for that in that program. So that was interesting that got brought up by her. And then just thinking about what Wayne was saying here and about, it's sort of like, it's almost like a Main Street if you think about it, right? Because all the retail's along that edge. Anyway.
I think
Sorry,
it
sorry to
brings a
interrupt.
broader public interest into the
Yeah.
process.
Any other questions?
Do you know, this is just curiosity, but do you know how large those grants are through Main Street?
They're not big, so like, I've used them before. It can depend on how many sort of defined storefronts the building takes up. So like, I've seen them as big as like $60,000. I've seen them as small as $2,500, right? So like, if you have a little 16-foot wide storefront on a main street and you want to put a new awning on, right, you can get grant money for that typically
Wow,
through that program.
that's good to know.
Yeah. And it's typically, it's the city and the Fed, so it's like sort of combined. So how that money flows, I'm not exactly sure. I used to just review them all.
Very good. Let me pause a minute and confer with the co-chair here. So we're going to go to the next agenda topic. Andrea is not able to be here today, and she has I believe she has a presentation or that she'll be bringing to us. Heidi has a presentation. She'll bring it to us for the next meeting. And anybody else that, Jim, if you have any further comments or something, then you can save that for the next meeting. So what we want to do is move right on to homework assignments, if you will. Again, this was kind of a challenge to do. What Heidi and I tried to do is break up those individuals that had experience with the National Register to stick with that. If they had experience with the National or the Delaware Public Archives to stick with that. But we're flexible. You know, we'd like to offer that as a suggestion for starting. And then when you get momentum, you can certainly pick a different topic to go to for For future agenda topics, I just wanted to, let me scoot forward for a minute. We're going to have a research primer. Christopher Bright and Dan Parsons are going to meet with Heidi and come up with a program on how to do research. For instance, there's a program called newspapers.com that maybe we need to research, maybe we need to get the city to join or subscribe to so that we can access different things. But I don't know what's on their agenda, but they're going to create a program for us to do that. The balance of presentations would be on the agenda. By then, hopefully, some of the members will have initiated some of the tasks that are on these assignments. Maybe we'll address the why question, and out of there, either that meeting or following meeting restrictions, because I think that's very important to address per Wesley's comments there. So, do you want to explain anything, or? You have a memo of July 22 in there. So I put,
When did you want to talk about who's going to be on what?
that's where I'm headed here.
Okay.
So members, this is a July 22, it says 2021, but I think it means 2026 memo here. Members recommended to work on the Delaware Public Archives marker, Kate McKenzie, Rosemary Patan, Christopher Bright, and Stan Mills, coordinator. Those four, I think, not necessarily have an easy task, but it's certainly easier than the National Register, right? So I included in the handouts or the memos, the attachments for the Delaware Public Archives application in Word, because otherwise you have to fill it out online, and I don't think there's a way to save it. But y'all can play with that. So, and I don't have any particular method or steps forward. So that's where I'm expecting you all to help figure that out. The members recommended to work on the schematic planning document. Remember, that's the precursor to the registration form, schematic planning document. Andrea Hoffman, Daniel Parsons, Wayne Neal, Mason Pretty, Michael Burton, Jim Ellison, and Heidi as a coordinator. And again, I included as an attachment the schematic planning document in Word so that y'all can play with it. And again, I don't have a methodology for you all. I would expect you to work with Heidi to come up with a program. Members recommended to work on researching, archiving, photographing. I just picked Frank and Wesley. Again, you all are free to say you'd rather do something else. Again, we're going to have the researching session next week on how to research and archive, because everything we do, we're going to have recitations or citations, right? And then we're going to need, I noticed on one of the applications, maybe it's both applications, that it requires photographs, current contemporary photographs. So I put that on for Frank Cole and Wesley Combs. Anybody else can do it too, but somebody's going to have to take photographs, and then we're going to need to archive those. So somebody's going to have to keep track of it. Now, Heidi, you mentioned something called Google Drive.
Yeah, I'm imagining that we can create a shared Google Drive with, if Frank and Wesley want to be in charge of it, they're sort of the curators of that space. They'll be doing research, which we're going to review what we need. But while we're all doing our work, we're going to find things too, and then we can give it to them to place in that organized space. And I'm hopeful that at the end of what we're doing here, we'll have this nice repository that maybe we could put online through the museum, the Rehoboth Beach Museum. And ultimately, it would be great if all of this work that we're doing could result not only in a historic marker and a National Register nomination, but an exhibit at the museum as well.
I think the memo of July 22nd, 2026 is your guideline, but we're looking for feedback from you all, whether it's now or spend some time looking at it over the next month, and then we'll come back here and do some more discussion. Anybody? Wes?
So, yeah, first of all, I want to clarify the date. The date is July 22nd, 2026, not 2021. So just to clarify, would it be helpful for example, for Frank, myself, and Christopher, and Heidi, are we allowed to meet? Because
Yes.
I have experience with Google Drive, so I could come up with a schematic, but I need to understand, is it going to reside on the city's website? Where does it sit, and kind of things like that, because it's about access requirements, who has access to it, who doesn't. But how do you want us to be able to convene as a group to talk about what's in that category, to come back to how we might?
As long as we're doing data collection, we're fine to get together.
Okay.
Once you start putting it on the form and saying, this is our collective thoughts on the form, do you agree with it or not, and we start discussing it, then we need to agendize it and be in a meeting. So again, getting together is fine. Incorporating a lesson for the next meeting on Google Drive. You're talking, when you're talking computer stuff.
But when it comes to
above
the tasks that are listed, researching, archiving, is that a task that would be given from the Delaware State Marker Task Force Subcommittee, saying we need photos of this for this out? I'm trying to understand, when you classify those tasks, are they assignments that will be coming to this? Is there a scope of work that defines what that?
I think they would be assignments coming from all the members.
But also, each of the groups will meet, and at this point, where each of the three groups will meet independently and develop the way they want to proceed as a group. So for the research team and photos team, it would be helpful for the historic marker team and National Register team to be able to ask for help, but ahead of time, there will be a plan of, okay, our group is going to, for example, review newspapers.com for all articles that relate to Boardwalk history, and figure out what the plan of attack is, for lack of better words, for how to get a good database for everybody to work with.
So that's exactly what I would have assumed. So then is it recommended or suggested that we should convene as a group before the next meeting to sort of talk about that and present it back at the next? I'm just trying to understand, because I'm not trying to, how does progress move forward? And I would add communications to that as another category in that category.
Yeah. For the next meeting, we're going to do a research, like how to do research. We're going to continue the balance of the presentations. And so I assume that the individual groups will start meeting after that.
Okay.
Is that what you were envisioning?
Yeah, and if we have time toward the end of the next meeting, then maybe we break out into the little groups. Utilize that time or something. Again, we're looking for input from you all. Jim?
I'm a little concerned that we're rushing ahead with assignments when, in fact, based upon what we discussed today, we're still very unsure of how we're defining Boardwalk. I know that the best approach, it seems to me, is Heidi's, which is that we're not talking about the physical thing, because it has changed and been rebuilt over decades. But doing it on a more of a cultural basis. But I think we need to come together on that a little bit more. And I hope that Mason Preddy will be here to make his presentation, because of the material that we received, I thought his was actually the most interesting, because it deals with boardwalk-like situations and nominations that have been put together, not based upon typical structural and, architectural bases. So I hope that we're not rushing ahead without hearing, and I know Heidi has a presentation, but I just think we need to come together as a total group a little bit more on exactly how we define what the boardwalk is.
You okay with that?
Yeah. Mayor Mills and I will meet after this meeting to discuss how to incorporate that into maybe the next session.
Yeah. Okay. In the meantime, you can still look at this.
Yeah.
Maybe a month or two premature, but go ahead and look at it. And again, hopefully we can devote some time at the end of the next meeting to continuing some of this conversation. But we'll look at agendizing a lot of the topics that we talked about today. With that, opportunity for task force comments. Anybody wants to say good of the order? If not, citizen comment. Patty, do you want to say anything about the boardwalk? Okay, you need to come up, yes, ma'am, you need to, or Marco will energize that thing for you. And remember, state your name and address, Patty.
I'm Patty Brown. I live at One State Road, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. You kind of want to do like a history of Rehoboth, right? Is that what these markers are for? Okay.
Just to identify the historic nature of the boardwalk.
Okay, so you're trying to identify the boardwalk. Well, isn't there a bathhouse that used to be there? Isn't that a historic site there?
Well, there actually used to be a pier there, the Horn Pier, and a bunch of businesses within the Horn Pier, and showers underneath, a locker room, I think, underneath the boardwalk.
Okay, so
So,
you had
yeah,
all that.
there's a lot of things that aren't there anymore.
Why can't you, well, I know they sold the properties, but maybe they could take that building and keep that part of the building where the bathhouse was, and then you can put a marker there.
Very good, very good. That's something that we'll probably way into the future. Come back to that topic. If you recall, Heidi presented the potential historic marker for a Black Beach, and we all hesitated, if you will, because we wanted to take a bigger look at the entire city with potential for historic markers and then prioritize them. So that will likely come back at some point. It's just not our priority now. Our focus is on where we're headed. Anything else? Review future meeting dates. That's what, August? 25. When is that?
25th?
Yeah.
August 25th.
June, July, August 25. That's the fourth Tuesday of the month at 9 o'clock. So we will create the agenda and share it with you all as soon as we can. Anything else? If not, I adjourn this meeting at 10:59 a.m. Thank you very much. Thank you.